I have to get my side into this too. They got me interested in trying it out, and the first time out, I called, it doesn't work anymore, and there's no address I can write to, so I have no way of contacting my daughter.
What would Markle
Thomas Markle just dropped something so explosive that the entire internet practically flew out of its chair. I'm not kidding. This man didn't just speak, he detonated a bomb right in the middle of Meghan Markle's carefully polished fairy tale narrative, and the way he said it, like someone who's been holding this inside for years, quietly watching the world eat up a story he claims doesn't match what he lived. He's hinting, no, he's straight up saying, that the official version of his daughter's timeline doesn't add up. And then, as if this wasn't messy enough, suddenly this dusty old 17 magazine from 1997 comes crawling out of the archives like some forgotten ghost holding a receipt, and what does it say? Meghan Markle, age 21. 21. Meanwhile, the official record claims she would have been 15. 15! That's not a typo, that's not oops, wrong column. That is a totally different life. And when you realize what that number does, how it twists everything from her Hollywood climb to her royal transformation, you seriously start wondering, what on earth is going on here? Because the more you connect these pieces, the more the fairy tale starts looking like one of those puzzles where the edges don't quite fit, no matter how hard you try. Before I even get into the mess, if you're watching this right now, just know the details I'm about to spill have been sitting in plain sight for years, hiding, waiting, and nobody bothered to connect them until now. So buckle up, because once we start, it's impossible to unsee. So let's go straight to Thomas Markle, the father, the man at the center of this storm, the one whose voice sounds less like gossip and more like someone trying to get something off his chest before it's too late.
a scandal nobody saw coming? What if the headlines you've been scrolling through missed the juiciest, most explosive?
You know how dads usually melt the moment they talk about their daughters? That soft smile, the nostalgic tone, the humble bragging? Yeah, none of that here. When Thomas talks about Meghan, his voice carries this strange weight. Like a man torn between love, regret, and the urge to finally correct the record. He doesn't sound angry. He doesn't sound petty. He sounds tired. Tired of being painted as the villain while watching a version of his daughter's life unfold publicly that doesn't match the one he remembers raising. He talks about her childhood in such clear detail. The theater rehearsals, the drive she had since she was practically a kid, the ambition that could steamroll mountains. He remembers her school plays, her graduations, all those little moments that become anchors in a parent's memory. Those are not things you forget. Those are the timestamps of someone's life. But as Meghan suddenly skyrocketed from actress on Suits to global Duchess, Thomas started noticing cracks, gaps, dates that didn't match, stories that didn't line up. And you could almost hear him thinking, why is this different from what I lived?
Or is there more to the story than we've been told? Stay with us as we uncover the explosive truth behind...
We're talking basic stuff, not vague, not fuzzy graduation dates, acting milestones, how old she was when she began landing roles. These aren't memories parents mix up. These are the big ones, the ones you brag about, cry about, photograph, remember forever. And yet Thomas insists the public version didn't match his reality. The math was off. The numbers were out of place. The whole thing felt like someone retold his daughter's story, but reshuffled it along the way. And look, say what you want about him, he's not a random stranger on the internet. He's not a tabloid reporter fishing for attention. He's the father who held her baby photos, who picked her up from school, who watched her grow. He doesn't need research, he lived it.
Across to Rosarito, Mexico, where we're joined by our friend, Thomas Markle, the father.
So when he says the timeline doesn't fit, when he suggests the official birth year might have been adjusted at some point, those words hit heavier than any rumor online. He's speaking carefully, like every word is chosen with a purpose. Like someone who knows this isn't a small thing, this isn't a tiny mix-up. This is a crack in the foundation of the Meghan Markle story we've been sold for years. And honestly, it was the first moment people stopped and went, wait, what? Because it's one thing when tabloids gossip. It's another when a father says, hold on, that's not how I remember it.
Look at Meghan Markle this Sunday, featuring an extraordinary message from her...
And then comes the magazine bombshell. Out of nowhere, we're thrown back to March 1997. 17 magazine, the iconic teen Bible of the 90s. Glossy pages, bright fonts, boy band crushes, fashion tips, the works, and on page 90, just casually sitting there like it's nothing, is Meghan Markle's name. Age 21. At first glance, you think nothing of it. Just another young hopeful trying to break into entertainment. But when you stop for 1 second and look closer, really look, everything flips upside down. If Meghan was truly born on August 4th, 1981, then in March 1997 she would have been 15, a literal high schooler. Yet this magazine, a physical, printed archive publication, lists her as 21. And that's a 6-year gap. Not a rounding error, not a typo, 6 whole years.
She just woke up one day in a new world and decided that she doesn't have any family.
I believe she had a clue.
I believe she had a clue, not 21. That line alone tells you everything. This wasn't someone misreading a number. This was a whole different age. One that changes her Hollywood timeline, her career arc, even the narrative of how she met Prince Harry. And remember, this wasn't a random blog. This was a national magazine that went through editors, proofreaders, and fact-checkers. The number didn't come from nowhere. It came from someone who submitted it. And suddenly the question becomes, who? Because if 17 magazine got that number from Meghan or her team back then, that means the 21 wasn't a mistake. It was what they were told.
The father that won't back down. Once a devoted father who proudly supported his daughter's...
And imagining a scenario where that number was correct, it flips everything. Meghan wasn't a fresh-faced 20-something chasing a young Hollywood dream. She would have been pushing 30 when she really started. A completely different narrative, one the public never heard. People love saying magazines make mistakes, but this wasn't a photo caption. It was a list. Names with ages, something that would have needed to be submitted, approved, documented, which brings us straight into the chaos of the two competing timelines, the version everyone knows and the version that doesn't fit. If 17 magazine was correct, why did the public story shift later? Why does the math bend so dramatically depending on which version you look at? One shows a rising young actress in 2006. The other paints a woman several years older breaking into an industry obsessed with youth. And that 6-year difference might not seem like much until you start lining up the milestones, graduation dates, acting roles, first auditions. Nothing lands where it's supposed to. It's like trying to build a puzzle with pieces from two different boxes. And that brings us to the biggest question. Which timeline is real? Because they can't both be true. Version 1. Meghan, born August 4th, 1981. The version plastered everywhere, shaping her whole public identity. Version 2. The magazine entry. March 1997, age 21, which puts her birth year closer to 1975 or 1976. That's a huge difference. A difference big enough to shift the story of her career, her age when she met Harry, even how old she was during the royal pregnancies. Now you see why people are freaking out. Meghan Markle's a strange. If she was actually born mid-70s, she wasn't a 36-year-old actress stepping into royal life. She would have been in her early 40s, maybe even past that. And that changes not just the narrative, but the public perception. The fairy tale of a modern young royal bride. And this is where things go from confusing to wait. What else doesn't match? Because then we move into the birth timeline, the story of Archie. And everything gets even messier. And just when you think the timeline drama is wild enough, things shift into a whole new level once Harry's version of Archie's birth enters the picture. The moment we start comparing what he wrote in Spare to what medical professionals say is possible, it's like stepping into a story where the puzzle pieces literally refuse to lock together no matter how hard you push them. Because according to Harry, Meghan had this serene, calm, practically spa-like birth at Portland Hospital, complete with not one but 2 epidurals. And then, this is the part that makes doctors' jaws hit the floor. They were back home at Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours, a 2-hour turnaround, 2 epidurals, a high-profile hospital, and a new mother supposedly recovering like she just walked out of a massage appointment, not childbirth. Anyone who's actually been through labor, or even just stood next to someone who has, immediately went, wait, what? And then there's the clock. Oh, that 2-hour clock. Let's break it down the way medical staff did. The drive from Portland Hospital to Frogmore Cottage takes roughly an hour generously, which means everything else. Delivery, recovery, cleanup, discharge, vital checks, paperwork, dressing, packing, getting to the car, all had to happen in 1 hour. And that doesn't even include the epidural wearing off, which simply does not happen that fast. You can't walk after an epidural until your legs start working properly again. The numbness wears off slowly. Safety protocols don't allow new mothers under anesthesia to just hop up and leave. Yet somehow we're supposed to believe Meghan, who was reportedly dealing with blood pressure concerns, was discharged and out the door like a superhero who just snapped back into action. But then the story gets even more tangled. Reports circulated, not rumors, but statements from an insider at Portland Hospital itself, basically saying the timeline described in Harry's book isn't how anything works there, not medically, not administratively, not ethically, not at all. Ethically. They said it was impossible, not unlikely, not maybe on a miracle day. Straight up impossible. And that's before we even touch the word that doctors treat like a flashing red emergency light, preeclampsia. Multiple sources whispered that Meghan was showing signs of it. Some even said early stages had already popped up. And preeclampsia is no joke. It comes with skyrocketing blood pressure, risks of seizures, complications that can become life-threatening within minutes. Women with preeclampsia get magnesium sulfate drips, heavy medication that makes you feel hot, sluggish, weak, and absolutely not ready to stroll out of a hospital hours later. They stay under 24 to 48-hour monitoring, minimum. None of that lines up with scented candles and quick exits. So when people started connecting the dots, The age discrepancies, the timeline gaps, Thomas mentioned, the magazine listing, the strange birth account. Suddenly, the whole story started looking less like a fairy tale and more like something that had been scrubbed and polished until the uncomfortable details disappeared. And that's the thing. Birth stories normally get messy. People forget details, they soften things, they summarize. But the medical community isn't confused because the story is too simple. They're confused because the story contradicts basic medical protocols. There's a difference. When you combine that with the earlier timeline issues, you can feel this uneasy pattern forming, little inconsistencies turning into bigger ones turning into massive questions. And then out of nowhere, the conversation circles right back to Thomas Markle, the father who keeps saying, quietly but consistently, "This isn't the timeline I lived." And suddenly you start thinking, how many details were smoothed over for image? How many parts of the story were trimmed, rearranged, or completely rescripted to match what looked best to the public? Because here's the truth no one can deny. When you're marrying into a family as enormous and globally watched as the British royal family, every single detail becomes part of the image. Everything gets curated, everything gets managed, ages matter, timelines matter, narratives matter, and any detail that doesn't fit the perfect story becomes a problem. There's pressure, huge pressure, to keep everything seamless. And when little cracks appear, the instinct is to plaster over them fast. A 6-year discrepancy in a magazine? Cover it. A birth timeline that doesn't match medical reality? Make it sound magical. A father saying things don't match? Label him unreliable. But here's where reality gets stubborn. Printed magazines don't magically change hospital protocols, don't rewrite themselves. A father's memories don't vanish because a new narrative is trending. And that's where this story finds its tension. In the space between what can be proven and what has been presented, I'll continue the next part immediately. The next